Today we have a very special guest with us. He is a quantum researcher for the RMIT University.
Welcome with us today, David Broadway.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. How's the day been?
Yeah, it's been pretty good.
That's
nice
good.
weather in Melbourne at the moment.
Yeah,
So.
it is pretty good weather.
Where's your current base that you say you spend most of your time in? Melbourne, Sydney?
So mostly Melbourne.
Mostly Melbourne, yeah.
I go to, so you have to go to Sydney occasionally for conferences and stuff. Yeah. Everyone wants to run a conference in Sydney because people that are international want to go to Sydney, which is crazy because obviously Melbourne's nicer city.
Yeah.
But
is it actually, with Sydney and Melbourne, is there more sort of people that are inclined or like these sort of conferences happening in Sydney than Melbourne or?
Yeah, so like for a conference you want a lot of international guests because it's nice enough, but to know people within Australia, but Australia's a relatively small scientific community. I know everyone in my field. Yeah. Probably personally, I've shook all of their hands, right? Yeah. So you want people that are external to come, and they're only going to come to Sydney or maybe Brisbane because they want to see the beaches, right? The famous beaches and stuff. When you say, "Oh, we're going to tack on a couple of extra hours of your flight, and you're going to be in rainy Melbourne, but there's great coffee," they go, "Oh, okay, how great is the coffee?
We'll get the coffee.
How good is this coffee?"
So for our audience that actually doesn't know exactly what you do in your field, can you give us a brief description what you actually do?
Yeah, so I do an applied field of quantum mechanics. So there's something that many people will know of is quantum computing, and that's trying to use sort of quantum information to do computations in a way that's more efficient than regular computation, right? So it's faster. I do sort of the exact opposite. I take a quantum bit, which is the same as what would be in a quantum computer, and then I try to use the decoherence of that, like the inability to do computation with it, to tell me information about the environment that it's in. So specifically, I use diamond. So we grow slabs of diamond in the lab, and we manufacture them to have certain defects in them that we can use. We combine that with some lasers, and then we measure magnetic fields.
Yeah, wow.
And that's what I do in my day-to-day job. I use lasers, diamond, and I measure magnetic fields. Why measure magnetic fields? Well, magnetic fields are really interesting in a lot of applications, but in two-dimensional materials is really interesting at the moment. But you need magnets in all of your technology. There's magnets in your phone, there's magnets in your computer, there's little tiny magnets everywhere. Your hard drive has magnets in it. So it's important to Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Let's bring it back to a sort of monkey level for our audience. So to start with, what do physicists do? Like in the modern physics, what are we researching about? What is sort of the new stuff that people want to go about? What are the domains of physicists that they're researching about? How is it benefiting the people? That's sort of how is it going to progress that it's going to come to a point where it's actually beneficial for human life on Earth?
So I would say there's like four main fields of physics, and I'm sure people will be upset that I'm only saying four, but I consider there to be four, and then there's a lot of subfields within that. There's particle physics, which we all know, it's the Large Hadron Collider. It's understanding how the smallest particles in the universe interact and why they interact the way they do. There's astrophysics, which is the exact opposite. How do solar systems work? Why does black holes exist? This type of stuff. Then there's the two fields that are actually relevant to us as individuals in the world, and that's condensed matter physics, which is like objects that we can touch and feel, and optics, which is light, right? And these two fields are very intertwined nowadays in modern physics. Most people that are doing condensed matter physics are doing optics and vice versa. But it's these two fields that are responsible for basically all the technology that exists in the world and all the advances to our lives that are happening. Particle physics and astrophysics are still great. They're really useful. They have invented a lot of very useful things. But they are fundamentally about answering questions that are not helpful to us as individuals, where condensed matter and optics is the opposite. It is trying to discover things about the way the universe works and then apply them to things that can help us. Now, most physicists are employed in this field. either at universities or in industry.
Yeah.
Almost everyone is dealing with, say, semiconductors.
Yeah.
In the semiconductor industry, that's condensed matter, right?
Yeah, because semiconductor industry, it's pretty big and it's very useful at the moment. I think as I sort of hear and like we look at other videos, there's a Vox channel on YouTube as well that talks about how there's a sort of China-America war going on the semiconductors as well, and how Taiwan's playing the main part.
Yep.
But we won't touch on that subject. But it's just more so that just to give people a bit of feel, that's what they're sort of going about. That's how semiconductors, that's how important they are for us, because they operate literally every equipment here, I believe, and even like these lights, cameras, whatever we have here at the moment, that's what it's doing at the moment.
Yep.
Even the cars and all those sort of stuffs have it. But why are we sort of researching about the stuff like you mentioned that doesn't have any answers to it, like you said, or something that's not
so
measurable?
I would say that some of these things are measurable. Okay, there are some people that are doing research and stuff that's not measurable, at least not measurable currently, right? But there's value in us trying to ask questions that have never been asked before and trying to solve those problems. Technology like the internet came out of particle physics because they had large pieces of data that they wanted to pass around. They invented the components of the internet, and then the US military and stuff also got involved. But all of these technologies came from this sort of endeavor. It's the same thing as going to space. Why would we send people to space? There's no real value in sending someone to space in its own right. But NASA and other entities have invented a lot of technology that's useful for us today, trying to get to that point. So by pushing our technology and our understanding further, we invent things on the way that are still useful. I'd also say that I don't think science needs to be useful. A good chunk of science should be useful. But we need to still respect the fact that science is there to just discover things. And one of those benefits is that those discoveries come into fruition to benefit us, right? But if we only look at science as a way as what is it producing now, which is what a lot of governments are doing, is like, why aren't you producing, startup companies? Why aren't you producing something that can help us now? If we look at science that way, we're going to miss out on all of these discoveries that could have been because we're so focused on something that happens now and not something that happens 20 years in the future. And those 20 years in the future could be amazing. Right? But we just need to allow those scientists to try it.
So it's sort of like we're trying a hit and error method. It's just like we try these a set of things. If they work, yes, good. We're progressing towards something better, which is going to benefit us in the next 20 years, maybe perhaps even 30 years, just depending on how it's progressing. But it could also go at a point where it hits the dead end, like subject matters like dark energy, dark sort of matters, because some of those things you can't really see. But there's actually, for the audience, again, I did a little bit of sort of research about this, which was that there's a lot of things that can be seen, but there's about a lot of things, a huge chunk of things that in the world that you can't really see or measure. Like, say, for example, Vibro, which is like the colors spectrum. So you can see Vibro color spectrum in rainbow, but you won't be able to see it like on a sunny day, say, or like a rainy day, or like a really cold day. So with dark matter and energy, is it that sort of area where we don't know much about it, or?
Yeah, so I think with things like dark matter and dark energy, we really don't know a lot about both of those things, right? We know that dark matter should exist, and most likely does exist, based off our astronomical measurements. Galaxies are just not big enough to survive. There's not enough mass in them. They would slowly fall apart. The only way that a galaxy can stay together is if there is mass that we cannot see. And the only explanation for that mass is dark matter. A mass that does not interact with light. So when you look at particle physics, there's plenty of atoms and they interact in certain ways. There's, they can interact with light, with electromagnetism. They can interact with what's called the weak force, which has certain bosons associated with it, or the strong force. But not all particles interact with every single type of force. So there's nothing to say that light is special and that all matter should interact with light. It's just special to us because that's how we view the world.
So is that something that we're perceiving, that there is something as dark matter and energy, or?
Yeah, so we know from looking at the way that space-time curves around galaxies that there are what's called dark matter halos. So there's a mass around, so like a spiral galaxy will be like a flat galaxy, and we can see a halo that's like a sphere around these galaxies that's dark matter. So we know that matter exists, and we know it's not interacting with light.
Gotcha. So is that something similar to a black hole?
No, it's very different to a black hole.
So what's the difference between a dark matter or dark energy and then black hole? Because in Interstellar, for example, the movie, a lot of the people would have seen it, talks about sort of black hole. Not the light can't pass through, right? And from what we're talking about, what I get is that with dark matter or energy, the light can't pass through as well.
No, so it's the opposite. The light goes straight through.
Straight through it.
Right?
Because the matter it's not opaque. Like it's something that it's
completely transparent to light.
Okay.
So a black hole is this aggregate of mass that's so heavy that light can't escape anymore. It bends space-time till the point where space and time breaks down. Right. So when you go in, you can't come back out. Because space-time's broken. Right. Dark matter just doesn't interact with light. You shine a laser on it, we'll just go straight through it. It's like there's nothing there. Dark energy, as far as we're aware, also doesn't interact with light, but it's not mass in the way that we sort of consider particles. It's the energy constant that exists in the universe that's forcing the universe to expand. Okay. So mass forces everything to collapse in gravity. Dark energy is the opposite. It's forcing everything to be pushed apart. And most of the universe is dark energy. Right. Okay. But the dark matter is what we just can't see, or we can't put in picture what it looks like, sort of. Yeah, so we can't see dark matter with light. Same with dark energy. We can see the effects of dark matter and dark energy. But how do you guys measure the effects then? So for dark energy, we can see that the universe is expanding because we can see the galaxies moving away from us. But not only that, we can see that expansion is accelerating. So Brian Schmidt, who was the Vice Chancellor of ANU in Canberra, I think he's just retired at the start of this year. He won the Nobel Prize for this discovery and showing that the universe is not only just expanding, but that expansion is accelerating as a function of time. And that can only be explained, that's the most agreed upon theory, is that it's because of this dark energy. Right? Now, there are efforts to measure dark matter, not so much that I know of for dark energy. There are efforts to measure dark matter, and they often revolve around putting a large vat of oil in a mine. So how does that help, in discovering? So what they do is there's actually one in Stall that was put here, but most of them are in the mountains in Europe. Basically, if the matter doesn't interact with light, it might interact with matter in another way, through the weak or strong force. And when that interaction happens, what we expect is that there might be some destruction, or there might be some extra collisions that will produce some light or some, say, electrons. Explosion, perhaps. Not to that degree. It's not a chemical. There'll be some release of energy, right? So, but how do you find that? The first thing you need to do is have a lot of mass. Thus, something like oil that's thick, right? You need to have no background interactions. If you just take a glass of water, that glass of water is constantly absorbing radiation from the universe, right? We're constantly absorbing radiation. We just can't see it. We can't see it. It doesn't really affect us. It affects us a bit if we're in space because the atmosphere does absorb it, but it still affects us for experiments. So that's why they go deep underground, a couple of kilometers underground into a big mine. They fill it up, and then they have these massive sensors. You can look it up online. You can see these scientists in little boats paddling around in these massive oil drums, cleaning the little things. It's kind of a really funny, surreal sight. So that's sort of something that's available on YouTube to have a look at. There's lots of demonstrations of it on YouTube and other channels.
What would we look up to find that information?
Dark matter experiments, dark matter search, that type of keywords, I think you'll find it.
Should come up with someone paddling.
Yeah, you'll see it, like when you see it on Google Images, you go, okay, that's what it's talking about.
And is there some sort of impact on humans by like this dark matter or dark energy? Like, can we interact with it in some format that is going to harm us?
So I would initially say no. That there doesn't initially seem to be any value from us knowing how to interact with dark matter or dark energy.
Because we're not doing anything.
Well, we don't know how to interact with it to begin with, and if it does, it's probably very weak and not very useful. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not value. Maybe we'll find some way to harness the energy of dark matter and dark energy. It seems rather science fiction to me. I have no concept of how anyone would imagine doing that. But the thing is, we don't know. And maybe when we do know, we'll go, why did we not do this earlier? Because realistically, the money we're spending on dark matter research is nothing compared to cancelling deals for submarines, right? Like, or doing stuff like that. It's really, honestly, nothing compared to some of the money we spend on a lot of other things that many, I think, people or general populace would say that we're wasting our money on that as well. Right?
With science fiction, like you mentioned, there's the famous movie Interstellar, the concept of, and there's also Inception, which like revolves around the science concept. Firstly, Interstellar, how sort of fictional is it, and how much of it is actually turning into a reality at the moment? Because that was released maybe 10 years ago at this point. At that time, people didn't understand it. There was a lot of people who watched the movie 3 times, 4 times, who are really into science to try to get a logic out of it. But they were just like, nah, this is just fiction. This can't be possible.
So Interstellar is sort of like very good with their scientific basis up to a point. Right. So their idea of how time slows down when you're near black holes, this is true. We know this to be a true fact of the universe. The big wave that would come from these tidal waves, the very smooth planet, all these things are very possible. There probably wouldn't be an atmosphere on that planet, but but a lot of these things are very based in reality. Obviously, the second that they go across that event horizon, it becomes science fiction.
So by event horizon, you mean the Milky Way galaxy?
No, so the black hole has this event horizon, which is the point where space-time breaks down. And towards the end of the movie, he crosses through this, and then he goes through this warped sense of everything. We've got no idea what happens behind an event horizon. But the first thing that we should really say about an event horizon is that you kind of won't ever cross it. Because as you get closer to the event horizon, time slows down. And it slows down more and more and more. So in reality, what you'll probably just be doing is sitting there from someone looking from outside saying, this person's never crossing the event horizon. They're just sitting there for all of eternity. Right? For you, you'll probably feel like you crossed the event horizon, but from an outside observer, they would probably just sit there for a billion, trillion years.
Wow.
So we don't know what happens when you cross an event horizon. Our concept of physics, our concept of the universe does not work once we cross.
There's nothing to test it because nothing can go past and then sort of...
So this is one... so there was a lot of hype around this idea that Google invented this wormhole on their quantum computer, right? And the hype around it was, one, because they claimed it was a wormhole. It's not really a wormhole in a traditional sense, but they claimed that mathematically it was very similar to a wormhole. So traditionally we would say there's absolutely no way that we can measure what is going on inside of a black hole, what's going inside of a wormhole or white hole or anything like that. But potentially we can simulate it using quantum computers. We can say, if we assume these conditions, what would happen if that was there? Now, we're still a while away from being able to do actual proper simulations like this. And there's a reason that when Google claimed this, there was a lot of scientists that came out and claimed that they were overreaching. But the concept is still pretty cool. The whole concept that we can't do it because we can't actually have gravity. We can't produce that gravity. But what if we can simulate with a quantum computer?
Interesting. That's a fairly good point there with all that. So you touched on a white hole as well. What exactly is a white hole?
It's the opposite of a black hole, where it just constantly spews out mass and energy into the universe.
Does that end up transferring from a black hole originally, or we don't know?
So that was the original thought behind a white hole, is that what if black holes are just wormholes, and they suck in, they're so massive, they suck in one side and then they're spewing out somewhere else in the universe. We should say that there's been no evidence of white holes existing. We have plenty evidence of black holes.
One.
No, we've never seen one.
Yeah, because you often see sort of NASA putting photos of the galaxy, black holes. There was a recent one as well, I think, that came out about a week ago. When I was doing notes for this podcast, I came across a photo. I just can't remember what it was called. I should have taken a snapshot. But in terms of, like you said, there's black hole where you just go through and you're not coming back. There's no signals or nothing. With wormholes, it's different. When you go through it, you'll burn because of so much mass and energy.
So the sort of science fiction idea of a wormhole is you'll go in one side, you'll come out the other, and you can sort of traverse space and time really quickly. It's like, okay, is there any way we can travel to another solar system in a reasonable amount of time? Or maybe we need some type of faster than light travel, which traveling faster than light's not possible. So can we do something like a wormhole, right? In a more realistic point of view, what will happen is when you go through a wormhole, all of your atoms, if you can go through a wormhole, if a wormhole can actually exist, I should say both those things. But if it could, all of your atoms would be deconstructed and you'd be ripped apart atom by atom, and then you'd be sent through the wormhole as like a stream of information, and then you'd be reassembled on the other side. Whether you'd be reassembled correctly, that's a good question. We don't know, because there's not a really strong evidence even wormholes exist. Theoretically, we can write down the mathematical equations that they can exist. But just because we can write down the maths of something doesn't mean that it has a physical representation in the universe.
So just giving a bit of effect to this theory, if you said that if a human comes on the other side sort of shredded into pieces and then they assemble, in today's world, if you talk to a biologist or someone, do you think they would think that this is possible to sort of shred someone apart and then they're put together by themselves, or they would think, nah, this is complete? Obviously, like you said, it's still not a theory that's proved. It's just something that's up in the air.
Yeah, I don't think it's like, I don't know if you can really say whether it's reality or not, because it's something that's so far removed from our technology that it's like magic, right? So we can't really say, does the magic of being able to do that, could it work? I don't know. It doesn't seem feasible to me. And I don't think a lot of scientists would say, that seems feasible. Why would the universe do that? I don't know. Maybe the universe does do it. But things like Star Trek and things like that make us feel like that type of thing is possible. And makes us want those things to be possible. But the universe hasn't seen Star Trek, so it doesn't believe in it doesn't believe like we do.
The concept just doesn't exist.
So we don't know what will happen when you go through a wormhole.
So you mentioned Google before, and every time people talk about Google and Elon Musk and all those things, these big companies, they're notorious to sort of keep their secrets. What are they working on at the moment newly? Like, obviously everyone knows there's SpaceX that Elon's working on, and then there's Blue Star, which is Amazon's deal, which sort of doesn't even come to light. There's sort of not much information what they're doing. I'm not sure if they've fallen back or off track. What's Google coming up with? There was like some information about them bringing out some robots or something like that.
So I'm not quite sure on the robotics side. So I know a fair few people that are in quantum computing, just being a quantum mechanic. That's the nature of the game. And I know what they're roughly doing. In the case of what they're publicly saying, and maybe I know some stuff that they haven't publicly said, but ultimately what they're doing on that front is just to put more qubits in. The the more qubits you have, the more complicated things you can compute. It's just like a supercomputer.
Yeah.
They're starting with like one rack of a supercomputer, and they're just trying to put more and more racks in. And then hopefully if they put enough racks in, they can do something useful.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is actually a good strategy, because if all the racks you put in are not very good, then you just have a really bad supercomputer.
Yeah, okay.
So other companies are trying to really make the rack really good. It's like, okay, I need to have a collection of quantum bits to do quantum computing. I need those bits to be amazing. How can I make them amazing? And then I'll scale up. And other people are saying, okay, well, my bits aren't very good, but if I have a heap of them, I'll be all right. So the bigger companies are kind of going about the heap approach, just throw money at it, produce more, and they're sort of getting sort of milestones. That's why they're in the media so much.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it's a good strategy long run.
What about AI? Everyone's getting or sort of close to getting comfortable with it now, because before AI was launching, everyone was talking about, how the robots are going to take over and the world's going to sort of go, humans are going to be the slaves and whatnot. All those conspiracy theories are going on. So at this point in time, all we know is that there's AI that is helping people generate emails, from photos to do all the sort of things that people don't really want to put effort into.
Yeah.
And it's just more humans are going to be relied upon more for the emotional sense. So if a company does end up hiring people, it's going to be more to show their leadership qualities and their negotiation skills, their time management skills, and things that AI can't really do, because they just can't emotionally portray that. But AI is going to help as a single tool as to compress works that humans, the more evolved version of a machine at the moment is what I would say is what it's working as, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should be very, very concerned about AI. I think it's such a powerful tool, and I think people don't realize how powerful AI is.
What exactly makes it powerful?
AI, a lot of us like to think that we're special. There's something special about humans. We have some type of consciousness, or we've got a soul, or there's something special about us and our intelligence, which can't be replicated. And therefore, no matter what AI does, no matter how good AI will get, we'll still have jobs, we'll still have that capacity. But it's just not true. We're not special. Our intelligence is not special. So it's great for us.
Yeah.
I like that I'm intelligent.
Yeah.
But it's not special in the universe. AI will outperform us in almost every single task, including the ones we think it can't. I saw a post the other day that was saying that they were testing AI and it had better bed manner than doctors. So it had a better emotional connection with patients than doctors that have spent their life doing that.
Right.
So I think people need to realize that AI is a great tool. It's making all of our lives better. But if we construct as a society a buffer where when the AI does replace the majority of our jobs, which it will, what happens to the people that are now have no employment? Because it will make things more efficient. It will make farming more efficient. It will make driving more efficient. There'll be all these things, and where efficiency comes, cost saving comes. So maybe food will get really cheap. Maybe all these things will get really great for us. But if all that sort of saving goes into profit of large companies, and then there's just a huge section of the population that never works and will never even have the chance of working, what happens then?
Who would you say would be in charge of placing that buffer, though?
Well, governments in the world need to come together and agree on certain constraints.
Just regulate it more, so you can only practice or research about AI to a certain extent.
Well, there are certainly those. Yeah, we should be putting restrictions on what AI is allowed to do. I think in medicine and in drug discovery, we should be rather concerned, not for what researchers at universities are doing, but what people can then take that AI to do in terms of making things that are nefarious, like toxins. You could say recreational drugs, but I don't think that's the real major concern we should be having. But things that could literally poison like half the populace if put into the water or something, right? Those types of things we should be really worried about, because AI is making drugs.
So how far are we from, for what it is today, how far are we into that point where it could actually lead up to those things that we just spoke about?
Yeah. I think, I don't have my dates right here, but I think Forbes was predicting that by 2025, most human management roles within large companies will be completely done by AI.
Wow, 2025.
Yeah.
That's not far at all.
It's not far.
We all got 1 year left, everyone. That's it.
Yeah. There'll be a lot of other things. Finance will probably be majoritively AI. I really like so many of these larger companies will be AI. Amazon with all its deliveries will be AI eventually. Where that comes will be another question. Their warehouses will probably run by AI, but their deliveries won't be because our society won't let self-driving cars just do whatever they want. Right. So there will be some restrictions.
Yeah.
But if those restrictions are alleviated, then it could happen very, very quickly.
So it's not going to be something that's going to come into light straight away, though. Like they will bring it in 2025, you reckon? But it can escalate in the next 5 years. You can see, like you said, about 75% redundancy rates in jobs.
Yeah, we could.
Which is a random number, but
yeah, it is. Yeah, but I think the big difference between like this sort of like revolution and other revolutions, like when we had the Industrial Revolution, all these low income earners lost their jobs because machines replaced them.
Yeah.
Right. These were sort of the poorer population. They could be shifted around to other manual labor jobs.
The car manufacturers, the Fords, BMWs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now what we're talking about is office workers, which is a huge chunk of the population. Okay, there'll be drivers that lose their jobs. There'll be manual laborers that lose their jobs as well. But we're talking about office workers. All these people that work in offices that think that their job is safe. Your job is not safe.
Yep. So the APS workers, the government services, and even the private sectors, KPMG and all those big ones, they'll be probably the big ones because they have the money to get those resources. They'd be the first ones to actually do that.
Yeah. I imagine KPMG is probably already developing AI consultants for certain roles. I think they would be silly if they're not.
Wow. So who are these companies that are building these kind of things? Like obviously KPMG is, as an example, is going to take those resources, pay for it. But is it Google and Elon's company, or like who are these people that are building these?
Well, anyone can build an AI.
Anyone can do it.
Anyone can do it, right? If you want to build a massively robust deep learning AI, the problem is that you need data, right? That's the key, is there's data. And companies have known about this for a long time. That's why Google is developing so much AI now, is because they've spent the last 20 years gathering all of our data so they can train their AI and stuff. That's why TikTok is good at giving you ads. It's because they have so much data. It's all about data.
Yep.
And there are companies out there whose sole job is to collect data to then sell that data to other companies to do their training. So it's all about the data game. And, small companies will struggle because they won't have access to that amount of data. So any big company can either purchase it or already have the data required to do this type of...
But eventually there will be a time where everyone can afford it, because it's just going to be something that's going to be more common and something that's just a bit more affordable for companies. But say those big leaders in the industry at the moment, at KPMG or in the construction industry, I guess, or anywhere, would they be sort of dropping down to the lower level jobs, or they would be sort of going to the lower companies that are paying them less? And that's going to create sort of more competition between people, because there's a pool of people which is so large now, and then there's just more sort of people that the company is going to be able to recruit from. So that's again going to be a massive issue, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's a massive issue. I think in the end what AI will probably lead to is less competition. I think initially it will lead to a lot of competition, because a lot of people will come along and say, hey, I understand AI, I understand how to use it. I'm going to have a startup company. I'm going to sort of take a chunk of the pie, right? And we already see this happening right now. There's so many AI startups. But eventually those AI startups will just be bought out, or they'll get large enough that they're big companies themselves. And then it will just be big companies again.
We're talking about Google,
all those types of companies. Google will probably just buy ones that they need when they need them. And we'll get to the point where smaller companies won't be able to compete And it's already hard for small companies to compete with big ones. Right?
Yeah.
It'll be even harder when you can't even build the thing that
Because
is the service.
I think building something is one thing, but then also maintaining it, updating the software from day to day or year to year is going to be more and more expensive after a point, because these big companies are going to be the ones that are going to probably bring in the parts of the softwares or launch something new, which is going to make it even more harder for the small companies to grow.
Yeah. And it just won't be as good. The deep learning in AI requires large data sets.
Yep.
If you do not have the large data set, your AI will not be as good.
Yeah.
Now, you can do a bad job of building an AI with a lot of data. No one's saying you can't do that. But the larger the data set, the more flexibility you have in making it more robust and making it better AI. So you can't get around that.
Yep. So can we use the AI for military use at the moment?
Yes, and it is.
It is being used.
It is being used.
But at a very minimal level, I would say? Or
I don't know. I would say it's being minimally used. I would say it's being used a lot.
So what are the areas? Are we looking at sort of the weaponry systems that are using this? Or we can't see, obviously, robots on war at the moment. There's war going on in the Middle East. We can't see physical robots. It's just the sort of weaponry systems, isn't it?
Yeah, so there might be a point where we start to see physical robots on a battlefield, but there's not a lot of value in doing that. You spend several $1 million to put an asset out into the field that might be captured. Why do that when you can fly a much cheaper drone over and just drop bombs, right? So the military will invest in those, but that's not the primary cause. I think AI is being used to automate things, weapon systems, targeting, where human eyes are not that good. It's also doing automation of tasks, like any automation.
In fighter jets and... Gotcha. Yep.
There's certain things that you just, like, we can't survive 10G for very long, if at all. Most people are already passed out. But an AI can. It can survive 20G, it can survive 30G, right? And it can still, at that, make decisions on how it should adjust its targeting and where it should go. Now, we already had things like this. We had computers, but the problem with doing computers is you have to write, or if this, then do that. And that's a problem, right? Because you have to anticipate everything. With an AI, it can make decisions that you haven't sort of necessarily said, do this and that. And it can be lighter weight, so you can need less sort of memory to sort of hold it. So it has a lot of advantages. And I think the military is taking AI very, very seriously. With
the drone systems and all?
I think most militaries envision a position where they don't have any human personnel on
operating even behind the doors, like behind
probably
the scenes.
Behind doors, yes, but not on the battlefield.
So like you said, the strategic decisions would probably be taken by AIs as well. Is that the same with the military, you think? Like AI will be making the decisions?
Yeah, so I think this is another one where we sort of consider that humans must be better, right? We're like, a human should make a decision of whether this person is an enemy, this person's not, whether this person should be, say, shot, or whether this person should not be, right? I'm not quite sure, because we're very flawed. We don't have very good reaction speed, and we can only see what we can see, right? Our eyes are not as good as cameras can be, right?
Yeah.
So there might become a point, and this is not the point we're at right now, because people do not trust AI and it needs more development. But there will, I think, become a point where we will want AI to make those decisions more than us.
Okay, yep.
You might be in a position where you could imagine a gun having an AI on it that actually stops you from shooting so you don't accidentally shoot a civilian. Right?
But then AI is also technology of human, right? So because at the end of the day, you're saying that obviously AI is going to come to a point where it's better than humans?
In what it's trained to do.
Yeah. So saying that, do you think AI will start making decisions and like sort of, for example, there's a new war that started between US and perhaps China, and AI is making a decision and it just makes a wrong call and fires a missile where it shouldn't be doing that. Then it just starts a war that in the first place only started because of AI?
It could, but I think people like to consider AI as like some sort of Skynet thing. where there's some sort of generalized intelligence for AI. There are people that certainly want to produce or are like thinking about producing this type of AI, which is sort of a generalized intelligence which would be sort of akin to a human but smarter, like say much smarter, but could still rationalize in all those sort of ways. It's not what AI is doing most of the time. What we choose AI to do is to do one or just a couple subset of decisions. We say, I want you to decide whether I'm going to show you Diary of a CEO next or Andrew Huberman.
Gotcha.
Right? And it's just that's the decision it's making. Now, it's going to have a lot more options available to it, but it's really just designed to make sort of one or two couple of decisions. So the decision for, say, an AI to launch a nuke, well, there's probably a series of AIs that would have to make a series of decisions to get to that point. And then even then, because of our distrust of technology, you would still probably have a human actually physically do the switch. So the human would have to get all those decisions and go, okay, I've received all these decisions. Yes, I would continue.
So essentially, AI will be there for human help at the end of the day, but the major decisions will still be made by maybe 2 or 3 or 10 people who are like sort of known to be controlling the country or governing the world.
It could be, It could go that way. I think really we'll see in the next 5 to 10 years what restrictions governments put in place.
So this decade and sort of the next decade, start of the next decade, is really going to shape how the world's going to move forward.
Yeah, I think the world will change in ways that we don't anticipate, and we won't recognize the world from what our parents sort of like grew up, or even as we grew up in it.
Yeah.
In what ways would we not recognize it? Physically or?
Physically, I think it'll be relatively similar, but just like going back to work, what was the unemployment rate for people at like when our parents were growing up, like 4%, 5%? Like what do you do when it's 40 or 50%? Like society has to change. Something has to change if that's the case, right? So it may not go that way, right? But those decisions have to be made. We have to make those decisions with the anticipation that could be the consequence. Right.
So it's a pretty serious thing then, like people would be taking it pretty lightly and enjoying the AI sort of benefits at the moment, but it's something that's going to cause a lot of issues.
Yeah, and I think we should enjoy it. AI is so useful, it's so powerful. It's just that we really do need to make decisions on a political scale that have really large ramifications.
But I'm sure there will be government around the world that are going to make those decisions so they don't drop the employment rate, but because they're not going to come in power if democracy is still alive, which I'm sure will be in coming years. If that's the case, then the government would want to keep the employment rate where it is at the moment or even lower for them to be re-elected. So they would have to make decisions in that favor.
They have to make decisions, but the government can only do so much, particularly if it's behind the ball.
So it's the private companies.
Well, no, it's like the government. So what we want is governments to look forward into the future and say, what's the problems that we're going to face in 5 to 10 years, right? Like in Australia right now, we have a huge housing crisis. There's just literally not enough houses. And the government says, okay, we're going to build X number of houses in 10 years, and it's a ridiculously large number, and they have no way to sort of do that, but they're going to try, and that means they're probably going to have to, maybe import more builders. They might have to, spawn companies to be able to achieve that task. But if someone had a thought 10 years ago, we're going to come into a crisis where we're not going to have enough houses, and they started doing that 10 years ago, then we wouldn't even be in a crisis now. And we'd have enough people around to build those structures.
Yeah,
but that's not how governments work.
Yep.
It's an idealized version of a government. Governments don't work like that because they work on 3 to 5 year cycles, depending on the country you're in, right?
Yeah, and the change as well. If a new party comes, they have new policies and they change, So they're not thinking about solving problems that aren't apparent. They're thinking of solving problems that are already hurting people. Right. Because if they solve a problem that's already hurting you, then you want to vote for them. Yep. If they solve a problem that you never knew was a problem and they've just solved it, well, you don't even know about it. Exactly, yep. So it's the short-term problems which can sort of be seen in the next 3 years, 2 years. It's not the big major problems, which, because any problem for it to be there be a solution for it, there's got to be a certain amount of, I guess, time limit for it to come into effect. So like you said, AI is going to come in 2025, which is next year. So it's going to take effect in the next 10 years to a level where people won't recognize what it used to be like, sort of what it is now in 2024.
Pre-AI.
Yeah. Wow. Very interesting. Yeah. So is there a part of sort of private sector like Google, Amazon, if they're doing anything, or not Apple, that they are pushing for the technology in obviously search for more money to push this technology as quick as possible, or they're sort of not really as evil as people take them to be?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we can say that a company is like evil. A company is a capitalistic entity.
Yeah.
Its sole purpose is to make money, right? It's not altruistic. It doesn't care about you. It only cares about making money. And that's what it should do. That's what a company should do. In capitalism, that's what a company should do. It's not evil, it's neutral.
Yeah.
It's just that making money often comes at a cost.
A higher cost,
and that we don't like, right? So this is why we need sort of regulations, and that's why most capitalist countries have regulated capitalism, right? There's certain things companies can't do because they're bad for the consumer. So I don't know if they're necessarily evil, they're just trying to make money, and often we conceive making money as being selfish and evil, but that's all they're trying to do. Are they pushing this? They're pushing this as hard and as fast as they can.
Right.
Because they know it's a race. They know the company that has the best AI will outperform the company that doesn't. So they know that's the actual race behind what they're doing.
Who would be the top 3 contenders, or the sort of the most ahead in technology at the moment?
It's hard to say. You want to say OpenAI, because of large language models. And I think the large language model like ChatGPT is very useful to a lot of people, and it's very tactile. You can touch it, you can feel it, you can do things with it. I think beyond that, you would probably say Google.
Yeah.
Places like Google and Amazon or social media, I think probably has the best because they have the largest data set, but it also has the most impact. Right? If General Motors has a really good AI that is not related to driving cars, but is related to something else like marketing or something, it doesn't have a huge impact.
Yeah.
But if a social media company has a really good AI for marketing, it has a massive impact. If you have a look and think about, consumerism over the last 5 years, and Alibaba, Temu, and TikTok.
Yeah.
How much crap is being bought around the world? Just absolute crap.
So it's basically a consumer market where people, obviously out there, not everyone is running a business model, but there is a huge chunk of consumers.
There's a huge chunk of consumers that are easy to manipulate into purchasing stuff that they don't need.
Right.
And these AIs are positioned to do that exact task.
Yeah.
So we are spending so much money as a populace on little trinkets that we probably throw in the bin and end in landfill for no reason other than like you watch something like, oh, I could have that. Oh, I press one button and it comes to my door and it costs $3. Why should something be that cheap if it's good? It's not. So
it's not. Yeah.
This rampant consumerism is a problem. It's a problem for our planet because we're wasting energy producing products that just end up in landfill. It's a problem for redirecting our money. So we're not spending it on experiences that improve our lives, but crap that doesn't.
Yeah.
And this is a massive problem. So I think AI in these social media things is probably the most advanced in a sense that it has the largest impact on us as individuals and on our society.
Right. Yep. So what should people do then? Like in this instance, like we're working and so is half the audience, most of the audience around the world, they're probably working as well. What should they do when sort of hearing about people going to lose their jobs? Especially youngsters like us, we are at a point where, housing's already like you said, pretty bad at the moment. People can't afford stuff, so, and it's going to get even worse. So what should we do to sort of get out of that sort of circle so we don't affected by AI?
I don't think there's a solution.
There's nothing.
I think accept our AI overlords and do what they want.
Yeah.
But I think it really sucks to be young, to be honest. Like, it was bad when I went through like undergrad. It's even worse now. Like, it's just getting worse, and it's not going to get better.
What is your part that makes it say that it was bad at your part and it's getting worse? Like, what part
just
of
cost of living, right? Like, when I did my PhD, I earned $24,000 a year, right? And that was hard to live off. PhDs are now 30,000 to 32,000 Australian dollars, right?
Yeah.
That's nothing when you consider the costs that you have to spend for your house or your tiny apartment that you might be spending 15 to 20,000 a year, right?
Yeah.
So it's so hard to be a student and make it through all these things because it's so expensive.
Yep.
AI gives us a way, particularly as a younger audience, because it's easier for us to learn new things when we're young and to adapt to them. And it's not that new. It's not that new to you if you're 16 because AI has been around for, a certain percentage of your life, which is much larger than someone who's 60.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I think younger people really need to jump on the AI bandwagon and improve their productivity by using AI so that they can leverage their time better. The problem is it's just like it's a no-sum game because then everyone will do that.
Yep.
And then everyone's like hyper-productive, which is why you have all these podcasts that are so focused on, squeezing every second out of your day. Every second must be, productivity. Otherwise, you might as well just throw in the towel.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's what we have to do to compete now is that we do have to use tools like that to take those tasks out of our lives so we can be more productive. Is it enough to live a good life or have enough money to do that? For most of us, probably not.
Yep.
And that's the sad thing, right?
Yeah.
So unless if something changes on a government level, because as individuals, we're not going to be able to change it, but as on a government level, it's not going to be enough for most people.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Someone earning $50,000 a year working in a supermarket cannot buy a house in Sydney or Melbourne. It just will not happen. Right? There's no way.
Yeah, that's not possible.
Right?
I mean, even at this stage, people living in sort of depending on where they're living, but Sydney, Melbourne, Canberra, the big sort of cities, the main cities, people paying $20,000 to $25,000 a year in rent. So that's already pretty high on an average. So if you're looking at nicer places, if you're living in East Coast, say in Sydney, you're paying even more probably. So. But don't you think, like, say for example in America, because the unemployment rate is at a level at this stage after COVID and after all the things that have happened, that the crime rate is increasing? Isn't this going to actually increase the crime rate in Australia if people go unemployed because they're going to go sort of insane sitting at home? They won't have anything else to do. Yeah,
I mean, historically this is absolutely true. When unemployment goes up, crime rate goes up because most people that are, even most criminals, don't want to be criminals. They don't want to, steal. They don't want to be a thief. They don't want to, hold someone up. They just want to be able to eat.
Yeah.
Right? Pushing people into a point where they can't afford to eat, they can't afford to feed their family, they can't afford to live in a house is the exact conditions where you're going to force people to do radical things.
Yeah.
Now, often those radical things are crime. Let's hope that those radical things aren't, extremists, which that can also happen when we push people into a corner.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
So, this will happen, and I can imagine that many governments will say, "Oh, well, now we have to crack down on crime." But in reality, the way that we want to sort of crack down on crime is by giving people opportunities so that they don't have to resort to crime.
Yep. What are some of the jobs that you see there's no way I can replace it, or it's pretty much everything can be replaced?
I think
maybe the sort of content creation, consumer, like people who are sort of making creative industries, maybe say a YouTube channel, or say someone who's making some sort of product.
Yeah, I think fields where people want human-to-human contact will probably survive. So serving someone at a cafe will probably survive because, okay, maybe an AI can do it better, but maybe I just want to have a human give me a coffee, right? So things like that will survive. Content creation is a tricky one because we already see the rise of a lot of AI content creation.
Correct, yeah.
Right? It's already on, and there's some of them are getting big numbers, like 1 million subscriber AI generated content.
Yep.
And I'm not even talking about someone that's writing a script and AI is reading it.
Yep.
It's pure AI.
Pure
right?
AI, yep.
Some companies are saying that they're going to not allow monetization on pure AI content. There's already restrictions on YouTube about how much you can use AI. So creative fields like content creation or painting or something like that may see a boom if AI is banned from making money on it. Right. So if you ban AI from making money on it, people will turn to that. And that could be a good thing. People can be more creative. People can have more discussions. People can do podcasts because that's a viable creative tool.
Yeah.
And people want to hear humans. They don't want to hear AI.
AIs, yeah.
Even if AI can do better than us, which it probably can, but as a people, we may not want AI there.
Yeah. There would be a point where you would want that human connection, like you said, because as much as people do like technology, after 2 days sitting inside your room, I'm sure the person on the third day would want to come outside, sort of meet people, even see people. So do you think that's sort of not going to replace the human aspect?
Well, I hope so. I think the problem is there's a couple of confounding issues here. So AI, I agree, we want human contact, and there's certain things that maybe we just don't let AI do. The other thing is that we might all have more time because we might have less work. Maybe we have to go to 3 days a week just to keep people employed because there's just less jobs available, which gives us more time for socializing and stuff. This is probably a very good thing for all of our mental health.
But then we need money to socialize.
That's the problem. You need money, right? So if we all want to go down to a cafe for a couple of hours every day, which is great, and hang out with friends and drink coffee and enjoy ourselves, but we have to have the money to be able to do it. So there's a couple of confounding problems that we just need to juggle. And I think as a society, we could all benefit greatly. Maybe we all will have enough money, we'll be working 3 days a week, and we'll see friends and family all the time, and we'll just all be much happier people than what we are now when we work 70-hour weeks, never see our friends and family, and just constantly thinking about how to make the next dollar. Right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a future. That's a great future. I hope so.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that whether we will get there or there will be much, much worse.
Correct. Yeah. Well, lastly, we would like to sort of ask you, what people out there who are listening, what do you think if someone wants to get into quantum science? What piece of advice would you give them? How should they start? Someone who's in college, who's interested in this field, someone who's in high school and is very good at it, and can use sort of his tools to help probably the country, probably the humanity. What can they do to enter this field, and what sort of fields should they enter, and where is there more scope to enter?
I think the hard thing about like sort of quantum physics or a field related to quantum physics is you can't do it without essentially doing a PhD.
Gotcha.
You just have to go through university. You have to find a university you like. You have to go through undergrad, master's, PhD. But there are things that you can sort of focus on now that will really help you. I think one benefit that is at least useful really right now is programming, understanding how to program, understanding how to construct code, and then probably on top of that, understanding how to use AI in code as well. I think is a fundamental skill that a lot of people are still lacking, but it's vital for science. Yeah.
Because AI is going to be such a big thing, it only seems viable to go towards AI and sort of create something new maybe.
Yeah, scientists are using AI. I use AI in my research. Most scientists are starting to use or are thinking about using AI. It's just something that you need to be across. But unfortunately for science, it just takes so long to learn the necessary skills and the background information to even start to contribute to that world, right? It really is such a, like, you spend 10 years of university to then enter a field to then learn more about that field and then start to do something. And then you spend another 5 years to 10 years becoming sort of on the same level as the experts of that field. And then it just keeps going and going and going, right?
Yeah.
Science is a really rewarding job.
Okay.
I can work from home whenever I want. I can go anywhere in the world for conferences. I can do most of the time the research I want to do and explore the things I want to explore. But it is not an easy road to get to that point to do that.
Yeah.
And you have to be ready that it is a lot of work. And it is very difficult to stay in science as it is now. Every stage after PhD, like every sort of like milestone in science, has roughly a 10% success rate. So to go from a PhD to a postdoc, you have about 10% of people do that.
Yeah.
To go from a postdoc to sort of like the next mid-career level postdoc, another 10%. Then to become a lecturer, 10%. Then become a professor, 10%, right? So when you filter that out, there is not many people that
get
last to the top. They're either the best of the best, or they're the people that were able to just stick around long enough for a position to be available, right? So it is difficult, but there are so many jobs in industry that are related to STEM.
Okay.
Right? Particularly in America, but there's more and more in Australia nowadays. There's a heap in Sydney. There's a lot of startups in Melbourne. High technology is a massive field, and in that field we need people that are engineers. We need people that understand quantum mechanics. If quantum computing is the future, we need more quantum physicists, much, much more than we have available.
Yeah.
And we need mathematicians, we need programmers, we need these skill sets. So we do need more people in STEM.
Yeah.
But
is this about sort of such a hard career that only a few selected people would want to go ahead to do this?
I think it is a hard career, and I think a lot of people get turned off.
Yeah.
What made you stick around long enough to keep doing it?
It's I was good at it. That helps, right? I had a good PhD, and that meant that I could see that it was possible for me to stay in academia. If I didn't have a good PhD, then I would have just wasted time doing a postdoc because it was unlikely I would have stayed in academia. So, I had a good PhD. Maybe I'll continue. Maybe that's a good avenue for me. It also gave me the opportunity to work in Switzerland for 3 years as a postdoc. There's not many jobs where you can go, I'm just going to move country for 3 years. And not only can you move country, in Australia, you're encouraged to move country for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And that's an experience.
Government provides the expenses.
Well, I was employed there, so they sort of paid for a lot of it.
Yeah.
But it's encouraged because your CV looks much better when you come back. You've gone and experienced science done in a different culture, in a different way. Yeah. Europeans do science very differently to we do in Australia.
Right. Would you say they're ahead of us, or?
I think, I don't know if ahead is correct. It's just different. Australia's very competitive. I would say that we're more capitalistic in the way we do science. It's like, where are the results? Why aren't the results coming in? Push. Where I think Europe is a little bit more relaxed. It's a little bit more old school, and people can sort of survive with less publishing but more sort of valuable research. So it's a different attitude, and it's good to see both sides. I think we're more close to sort of the American sort of idealized academic route than we are close to Europe.
Gotcha. So what is turning out to be a better outcome, to be that push results, or to have a more relaxed and results would sort of come with time and patience?
Yeah, I think both are necessary.
Yeah.
I think
it's a good balance.
You want to have people that are pushing hard to get new results because they push to get things that they can't get done. But this being said, some things just need time. And if you're constantly pushing for when's the next paper, when's the next result, you don't have the time to do certain things. And it's very different in America to Australia. Our PhDs are 3.5 years. After that, the government says we're cutting funding off. In America, a PhD is 7 years.
Yeah.
So a single student can do a 7-year project with no results until the end of that project.
Wow.
You can't do that in Australia.
Yeah.
Not only is it not that long, but the university gets concerned if results aren't coming out, and they're saying, why aren't the results coming out?
Yeah.
You have to publish, right? So that's why we've got this weird mixture where the students aren't around for as long as they are in America. Although that being said, Americans don't do master's degrees; they just do PhDs. That's part of why they're longer. But we also aren't allowed to let them sort of, discover things more slowly. So we're a weird hybrid. There's value in everything. Nothing is good. Right? Because all of it is restrictive in some capacity.
Yeah. I know I said that was the last question, but I have one more question, which is to do with you mentioned at the very start of the podcast submarines. I did watch another video which was by Wox and also by Johnny Harris. He is on YouTube. So he discusses some subjects about submarines and how sensitive they're becoming, and a part of it, what he discovered was that quantum science was associated with the nuclear powered submarines that are coming out at the moment. And I think Australia is one of the countries that USA recently signed a deal with, which everyone was sort of against, that they're spending that much money on the technology. But do you think that's necessary? And also, how is this technology, is it sort of dangerous for humans, or like it's going to pan out either or way more sort of defensive against countries that we need to defend ourselves from?
Yeah, right. So I know people that are funded through both the Australian and the American Defence Force to do quantum research. Quantum physicists, this isn't like the 1940s. Quantum physicists are no longer sort of exploring how to make nukes, right?
Okay.
So we're not being funded to make new weapons. I'm not funded by the Defence Force at the moment, at least. What we are being funded for is to develop sort of technology for sensing. So instruments to sort of measure if something is there or if something is not.
Which is used in submarines.
Which can be used in submarines. So military is liaisoning with quantum physicists, either to make quantum computers, quantum cryptography, sort of make like encryptions that can't be broken or something like that, or they're using it for sensors. But as far as I'm aware, there's no quantum physicists that I know of that are working on any sort of weapons-based systems anymore. I'm sure there's employees of the Defence Force that are working on weapon systems that are physicists. But in terms of like researchers in universities, none that I know of.
Okay.
Yep. So hopefully it's the opposite. It's just making people safer.
Gotcha. Yep. So what they're trying to do at the moment is really use those submarines or those budgets to protect us from an external threat.
Yeah. Like navigation tools.
Navigation
right? Like
tools.
They're not tools aimed to hurt people. They're tools meant to keep people safe or navigate or do that type of stuff.
Cool. Well, on this note, we'll end the podcast, and thanks for coming.
Yes,
we really enjoyed the conversation.
That's right.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Let's get this AC off. What do you reckon?
Go for it.